Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy, you could never unlock my secret. Oh no, Mr. Suddenly. Hello, Levy. Let's begin. Indeed.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat. And today I have a returning guest, Jerry Clifft, who is going where he is he's part of I guess you guys, it's like a movement or like a little, team or collective that is looking to get there's an issue. It seems to be a rampant epidemic of false allegations. So, false allegations, which are all allegations are taken seriously. And some of them can be tools that are used to destroy people's lives. And you are one of those people. You guys are associated with the wouldyou.care, right? That's the website, wouldyou.care. Mm-hmm. And there's also a change.org petition for falsely accused and wrongly convicted former military service members. You are a service member, and I want to make sure I said your name at the beginning. I think I did. So, Jerry Clifft, welcome to the show, first of all.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and how are you doing? How are you faring since the last time we talked?
I'm doing well. I don't have any real complaints. Life is pretty good, all things considering, so I'm hanging in there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. So, for the people who may not know, so we did a show, but it got cut short. I guess you had some issue with your phone or the battery died or something like that. So we're gonna try and do it over and then get the whole story this time.
Sure.
Is that okay? So, first of all, how did you I guess what's the story of what happened to you?
Yeah, that would take us all the way back to 2014. I'd been married for about 5 years at that point. It was clear it wasn't going well. At some point in there, we had split up. She came back. We tried to work on it. Got pregnant again with a second son. That son was about 8 months old in 2014. It was July. I believe early July, and I'd reached my limit with our fighting, and neither one of us was happy, and she wasn't going to leave, so I decided to say the words. Told her I wanted a divorce. About 2 weeks later, I was sitting in front of my commander, being told that I was under investigation for a sexual assault. So that was her response to me asking for a divorce. That whole process took the investigation, prosecution, trial, all that took about 1.5 years. So that led us into 2016. And I was found guilty of sexual assault. Contrary to my pleas, I pled not guilty. And I spent 3 years in a Navy brig in Charleston, South Carolina. I spent 1 year on supervised release, and now I live in Oklahoma. I'm a registered sex offender. For the rest of my life, there's no path off of the registry here in Oklahoma. And I have to check in every 90 days. And randomly, sheriffs will come out and check my residence, check on me. It's much like being on parole. They'll come to my job, make sure I am where I say I work. That's the short and sweet, and we can kind of dive into the fine details as we go along, I guess. So
yeah, so we will do that. Sure. First of all, wow, that sounds awful. So let's go back to when the allegations came out. Were you in the midst of a divorce as this was happening? Like, were you still doing the paperwork, or sort of like, was there an issue with child custody at the time that these came out?
There was. She initially, before she levied a sexual assault allegation, she tried to get a protective order under other false allegations. But the difference was that she did not take it to the Coast Guard Investigative Service. She took it to local police. And local police, for the past decade or so, have taken a pretty strong stance on any kind of domestic violence situation. If there's any kind of suspicion, you're going to jail. It's a risk to the safety of the people involved. It's a risk to their career, and they opted to not arrest me. The judge opted to not put into effect a protective order, so that was dismissed. And it was shortly after that I was brought in to see my commander and showed the investigative sheet that she just had drafted up and the charges that they were investigating me for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty obvious that the marriage was over.
The allegation is definitely evidence of that. But before, yeah, for sure. What was it that you were specifically accused of? Like, do you know what you were charged with?
Yeah, specifically, I mean, this isn't verbatim, but it's going to be close. It was sexual assault by bodily harm, which is Article 120, enumeration B, which, they redid the 120 statute. It contains every sexual assault, sexually related crime, basically, in the UCMJ. And then I don't know about what it is these days, but back when I was charged, there was maybe 8 or 9 different enumerations in which the type of crime, the mode of criminality that you use to convey the sexual assault would have been charged under. And mine was bodily harm, which is the only one in that statute to which actual consent could be a defense for. So basically, she's saying that she didn't want sex to happen, and yet it happened anyways. And that's the basis of the crime. There was a, her allegation pre-trial all the way up into the day of her testimony was a rapidly moving target. There were stories, and this is both in an official and unofficial capacity, so statements she made to people that are mandatory reporters, basically first responders, clinicians, things like that. Statements she made to friends who aren't mandatory reporters, but we got their statements and testimony anyways. There was a version where she was allegedly raped repeatedly in one day, one where she was tied up, taken against her will, another where there was a gun held to her head, one that took place 30 days prior, which we'd never heard about until the day of trial, in which we kind of assumed to be basically a kind of dry run just to see what kind of response she would get from somebody if she made such an allegation. And that's not even her first allegation against a Coast Guardsman in her life. She was, I'm not going to give the guy's name, protects privacy, but she was engaged to a guy who worked in the aviation field of the Coast Guard. They split up many years ago, and that was a story I had always heard from her, that this guy sexually assaulted me, and that was a story that her mother knew about and a few other people knew about, and she just had interviewed her mother, and her mother brought that up. I can't remember exactly in what context, but she brought that up. And when my accuser was pressed about that, she suddenly went silent and didn't want to talk anymore. And that was the last time she spoke to investigators. So, and
wow. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It's fine.
Oh, all right. Well, let's see. Yeah, let's go back to, there's a lot going on there. So, you said that you guys were not getting along, like it wasn't working out. Maybe you
Right.
got married too young, too quickly, or whatever. All right. But you said that you fought, but when you fought, was it just verbal, or was there some, physical stuff that happened? Because like what the reason why I bring this up is that couples fight, it happens. In most domestic violence situations, it's both ways. Like they're both violent to each other, and it's usually because they're generally dysfunctional. But the way that police are trained on dealing with, and not just police, but like anyone, that has like some ability to enforce, laws, that whether it's the military or whatever, they're operating under the same model, which is it's a sociological tool called the Duluth model, which always assumes the men are at fault, which is why, even if the like if a woman is hitting a man and she hurts herself harming him, she could call the police on him and he would get taken away. And that's just kind of like the norm. So and I know that there's a lot of cases, probably most cases, where there isn't violence per se, but there is a lot of, raised voices and, shouting and stuff. There may be like, you may feel like you're close to like, cutting loose and all that. But what I'm wondering about is when you guys argued, I'm wondering if she's not marrying, like maybe like a kernel of truth to a much larger lie. So that, like that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I like to call them reductive fallacies, where there's a bit of truth, but it's way out of context. I get what you're saying, but no, there was never any physical violence one way or the other. She never put her hands on me. I never put my hands on her. Okay. I mean, sure we yelled. We were both young. I think I was 25 when this all started, back in 2014. So yeah, it was normal young couple stuff,
Yeah, I'm just curious because, like did she ever do anything like injure herself maybe to make it look like something happened?
No, nothing like that. I mean, she did have a history of self-harm, none to my knowledge while we were together.
Like she was a cutter?
Yeah. Before she met me, I don't think she was doing any of that while we were together. I could be wrong, but but before, and she was open about it. It's something she told me about. So.
And the previous guy that you say that she claimed that abused her, or like basically had a similar story to the one she told you. I know this is a bit of a stretch, but out of curiosity, like, did you ever meet him, or because he was in the same kind of work that you were? Okay.
Once I was released, I did try to reach out to him, or not even reach out. I tried to find the guy, and I can't find him. Just to touch base.
You wanted to see if his experience was sort of similar to yours. Is that why?
And I saw his interview and I read his statements, and that was his first time. I really believe that was his first time ever hearing that story. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, I didn't do that. And then he shut the interview down immediately. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what this is something that a lot of guys experience that we don't hear about, which is why I was curious about that. Okay, so she made the allegation. She didn't go to, so you were with the Coast Guard, right?
Correct. Yeah.
She did not would she normally have to go through the Coast Guard for something like this, or is it more like, you go to the cops like most people do?
Well, initially she had gone to the cops. In fact, what she did is she went and got a SANE examination done. We did not know, so she got two done actually. We did not know about the first one for a very long time. She went and got the first one had no findings. She went and got a second one. And the second one claimed there was some small abrasion, which is really unremarkable. But, when you get down to the technical terms, the abrasion in the report said caused by blunt force impact, which could be it could have been from the prior exam, could also be from consensual sex, which we had an expert testify on, and the government expert conceded that, but it sounds bad, right?
Yeah, of course. When you
So
say abrasions, yeah. So
abrasion
these are,
from,
you're saying that they use was it the rape
and
kits? Is that
it's
what you mean?
singular abrasion, not abrasions. It
Yeah.
was one,
Yeah, it was just
and
one.
I forget the measurement, but the same examiner said it was in the report, but it was insignificant. It was incredibly small. But other than that, no findings.
So what it sounds like you're saying is that a woman could have consensual sex, claim rape or sexual assault, and then get a rape kit, and it would show if they found any abrasions, like just one, that could be enough evidence to convict, because ultimately the abrasions don't matter. It's the consent, and you can't test for that.
Correct.
Right?
And that's, again, I mean, looking back, I can't tell if that had a significant impact on the jury's decision or not, and I may never know. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that shines more of a light on how, to what lengths the prosecution, the government will go to paint a picture. It's like, truth is not the goal. All right. It's all about the W. They want to win. You got these young prosecutors feeling the pressure of higher ranking people than them that are also feeling the pressure from people in Congress that are saying they want results. And if we don't see them, if you don't toe the line, if you make statements out of character with what the status quo is, your career's over. And that all trickles downhill, right? And so that's where the major problem lies, is in the power and the money is tied up in people's careers and futures, right? It's not like checks being paid out to bribe people. It's something much more subtle. If you tell somebody their prestigious career, and all these headshots that they've taken that have adorned the offices that they've held are going to mean nothing if they don't play along, they're going to do what you want, more than likely.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to be brave when that much is on the line, especially when those people have families.
Yeah, I agree. It's not so much about money per se as it is about like a sustainable career. Like you're holding on to what you have, or you're trying to get more.
Right.
So yeah, because I think that's right. I think that's
we
right.
got a little far afield, but back to those SANE exams. That's what kicked it off. Because they're mandatory reporters. Somebody's coming in, regardless of the veracity of the statements and whether or not the nurses believe, like they have to report. So a police officer comes in, they do an investigation, and they move forward with it or they don't. Well, they declined to go anywhere with it. But as a matter of kind of good faith, or I can't find the right words, but basically they reached out to the Coast Guard and said, hey, we're not going to do anything with this, but this is also your field, right? Because the Coast Guard has jurisdiction over any Coast Guardsman anywhere in the world. So Virginia Beach declined to do anything, and the Coast Guard picked up the investigation, and it went from there. So
okay, so the Coast Guard picked up the information, and how did that go?
It obviously didn't go well for me. Looking back, I feel like the investigators that interviewed me, I don't think they were in on the drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. They were pretty professional. They were fair to me. They didn't do anything crazy. They didn't do anything out of pocket during the investigation. They just interviewed. They interviewed me. They interviewed her, some of her family members, some of her friends. And that was really the gist of it.
Yeah, so it sounds like they wanted to like get it like brush it under the rug, or get it over with as quickly as possible, and then move on to the next thing. And so if it was just faster and more convenient for them to just convict you and then leave it at that, I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but is that a fair assessment? What you think?
It is, but when it comes down to whether or not to push forward with charges and go to a court martial, it's solely out of the hands of the investigators, and it's directly into the decision making of the JAG. So the Judge Advocate General, And you know, it's a narrative I've heard too many times, and it's probably less true today. Things are, from what I hear and what I understand, things are getting better. But we're talking 2014, height of Me Too movement stuff. You know, women, why would somebody pretend to be a victim? Victims, quote, deserve to be believed.
Yeah.
All these hot button statements and things like that just really, it was good at getting at the emotion of the issue, but not really conducive to, you know, when it came down to getting to the facts of something, it got in the way. So, and all of our sexual assault prevention training, which we had to do 2-3 times a year, was all stuff like that. And, you know, going through it before going through a court-martial experience related to those incidents, you don't ever really think about it, but then it hits you. It's like, oh, wow. Like I'm really in this mess now. You know, it's geared against you. It's not a good time. You know, you see the posters and things like that where, like, if two sailors got together and they were both drinking, Becky can't consent, but Jake can. Jake knew what was going on because, you know, men are horrible and they will rape you. That was the narrative being pushed very hard.
I bet it's the same as, it's the same one they put in universities.
And
it's
crazy.
Yeah, it's the same. Like, they'll literally, there's countless stories of men and women in the military, in colleges, at work, whatever. They both get wasted. They both go home, to a hotel or whatever. They both do the deed, and then the woman cries rape. If, like, say, for whatever reason, I'm not saying that this always happens, but a lot of the time when it does, it's because those women are trying to protect something, like they're cheating on their boyfriend or their husband, and so they're like, oh, I don't want to get caught, so I'm gonna cry rape or whatever. The issue is not that, because, you know, dishonest people exist, manipulative people exist, they'll do stuff like that. The issue is that the system will support that. So, you know, guys will get thrown behind bars, they'll get court-martialed, they'll get unpersoned, they'll get put on, you know, sex offender registries, and it's that is really the issue, right? It's like, we have to do something about the way that we talk about these things, the way that we think about these things, like when we hear about them. And I think that most people have been sort of conditioned to side against the man when they hear the story without even considering, you know, any of the whatever the evidence might be or whatever, because it's kind of like in our nature to do that. So it's a shame, but I think things are getting better. I think that there is a bit more reason coming to things, because, like you mentioned, when the Me Too movement happened, it was such a big deal because of we already were conditioned to be like, oh no, those poor women, what are we going to do? But then there were some bad actors that were like, we're going to use this, right? And so they did. So
and there's another layer to that in the military when it comes to the system being designed to favor a certain outcome. And that outcome isn't truth and justice. That outcome is propping up the victim in favor of putting the accused away. And that comes in the form of, and this was in the minutes of my trial, and it blew my mind to learn it. So when somebody makes an accusation, it's immediately ran up the pipeline. It goes right to CJIS, and an investigation is going to happen, period. It's never going to be contained within, it's typically for most crimes or accusations in the military, it starts at the command level. The command makes a decision. It's completely out of their hands and goes right to the investigative services. And at least back then, and for at least another 5 or 6 years after that, if you were accused and investigated, you were going to court-martial, period. It did not matter. Unless there was some crazy recantation or something like that, or they caught it on video, you were going to court-martial. It was going to happen. Didn't matter. It didn't matter if the local civilians dropped it. It was going to happen. But in addition to that fast pipeline to a trial stage, the accusers, there's a benefit for accusers to make these accusations. So for my situation, as an example, my accuser was a family member. She was a dependent. So there's an actual U.S. code, and don't quote me on it. It wouldn't be that hard to find if you did a Google search of it. But there's a U.S. code for accusers who are the victim of a service member that are, tied in as family, as dependents. If I were to go to prison or go to jail at this court martial, this accuser, because they are dependent, would be entitled to my pay, to insurance, college tuition, even things like child care, other tangible benefits, monetary benefits, things that can be measured and quantified, right? So we're talking about money. It's a payout, basically. If I were to be convicted, they would be entitled to all these things for up to 3 years. And I know that she got that. I know for a fact that she received it. So she received that, not to mention it's a slam dunk
And this
for any kind of divorce court.
Right. This payout comes from the state then, right?
It comes from the federal government. Yes, it's a federal government.
Okay, from the government. Yeah.
Right.
And it's a slam dunk because you were saying.
Yeah, it's a slam dunk in the family court. So, I mean, I forget the actual math, but that amounted to just shy of about a 6-figure allotment of various benefits. Like that's kind of crazy. Like, hey, we're going to give you this massive incentive to go along with your story. Okay, no strings attached. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I don't go to jail. She doesn't get the stuff. If it does work, I go to jail. She gets the stuff. Let's say it gets overturned or she recants or something like that. She's not going to be held accountable because they won't touch her. She's not under the jurisdiction of the UCMJ. There's no. So what I'm basically getting at is there's a system built where there is no negative.
She's got nothing to lose to
she
like
has
do
nothing
that.
to lose, and not even nothing to lose, but like we're gonna prop you up and give you a real big incentive to go lie or stretch the truth and hope for the best outcome for yourself. So imagine doing that in any other state, any other jurisdiction with any other law. It's wild.
Yeah,
And
it's wild.
If the accuser's not a family member, and if they're just another service member, right, a boyfriend and girlfriend, bad breakup, a one-night hookup, whatever, and this stuff happens.
Sure.
If they're in trouble at their command already, a real good way to get out of that trouble and to get away is to make an accusation. To protect the quote victim, they will pick them up and ship them elsewhere so they don't have to be stationed with their accuser. If it works, and just because of the documentation of that event, it's a fast track to 100% disability from the VA once you get out, because you have quote, PTSD from your experience. Right?
So more benefit, yeah.
Oh yeah, more benefits.
Crazy.
It's insane.
How much of this do you think is also the military itself trying to like cover its ass? No, sorry for the language, but like there's I think there is a rush in a lot of these cases with universities too. They're like, okay, this is gonna be bad for our reputation. Let's just push this through. He's guilty. We'll move on. Like, or at the very least, we're gonna come forward and like throw him under the bus, because if we don't and we defend the guy, or we like give him too much due process and take too long, it's going to get too many eyes on it. It's going to make us look bad.
Right.
Do you think that's also a thing too with the military?
Very much. I think the military has a very long history, and don't get me wrong, like despite what happened to me, I love my country. I'm very much still patriotic. I even love the services. It's not like I look at the JAG as a separate entity. Like we may have worn the same uniforms, but we're not the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Given the opportunity, I'd throw it back on and go back to work tomorrow. But I think the military has a very long history of when the people, the powers that be, Congress, right, presidents, things like that, when they make decisions and they put their thumbs down on the military services and say, hey, you better, we expect results on this issue, make it happen. I don't want to hear excuses. I just want to see it get done.
Yeah.
suddenly the military is a hammer and everything is a nail, and they hit it hard, and they kind of deal with the casualties on the back end, which is what's happening now. We've seen that played out before in other realms of wartime issues like Vietnam, all the way forward to Kuwait, and most recently the global war on terror, the weapons of mass destruction, right? Things like that. People pulling the strings behind the curtains, and the military went and did the bidding, and they were doing what they were told, and it was all for something that didn't exist, and a lot of people knew it didn't exist. And we're kind of jumping off into, I hate the word conspiracy, but it's very true. Like, that's very much a fact.
For sure.
Weapons of mass destruction didn't exist. They weren't real.
Yeah.
And then
if you don't know that by now, I don't know what to tell you, like I agree. It's like there's a difference between the bureaucrats and the soldiers, right?
Right.
So that's basically what we're talking about. Speaking of bureaucrats, so the people who have been pushing this, I remember when we talked a little bit about Klobuchar, who was, I think that it was like, it's Amy Klobuchar. She's like a member of Congress, I believe. And she was involved with the pushing of this kind of Me Too thing in the military. Maybe I was talking to Arvis about that, but
it may have been. It sounds familiar, but I did watch his interview.
Yeah. I believe that was the case. Well, I'm saying there are definitely people in political power. They're like feminist activists that are also part of Congress, and they're pushing their kind of this feminist theory into the various like practices, and that's how I think that's how, because there's a lot of bad science like involved in how they come to their conclusions. So that's why I brought it up. But I want to go back to what happened with you. So she made the allegations, she got a payout, and I assume that this also basically just guaranteed her the kids.
Oh, absolutely. I remember signing the finalized divorce papers in the brig. So there was nothing I could do. I mean, I was going to be in prison for 3 years. There's no way I was going to get anything remotely close to what I wanted. I have 2 sons with her, and I have not seen since April of 2016. I don't know where she is. I don't know where they are.
So you haven't spoken to them or anything? You have no idea?
No, I have no idea.
Oh, that's got to be tough.
It is.
And for your trouble, so you were in the brig for 3 years?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And after that, I understand that you had to register as a sex offender based on, well, basically it's just like, because of even though, there's no evidence of anything, but this is just like part of the procedure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's, other than the parole aspect, which I think that's worse than parole, because isn't it true that if you're on parole, there's a point where you can like not be on parole? Is this like for the rest of your life now?
Yeah, this is the rest of my life, and there's no way to petition to be removed from it, just because of the unique way in which I was placed on there, which it's all in the federal code under SORNA. Qualifying offenses under the UCMJ, if convicted, will land you on the sex offender registry. And what they do once you're released is they kind of have, I don't know who the person is or the board that does it or whatever, but they send your information to them, and they kind of determine what tier level you're going to be on. And if you're in the military and you come out convicted of a sexual crime, it's going to be tier 3 every time. Lifetime, every 90 days for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter the severity. I've done the comparison. If you want to get down to brass tacks on the elements of my charge versus similar elements within the state of Oklahoma, granted they're not verbatim the same, because Oklahoma is its own state, writes its own laws. There are people who have done much worse who will be on the registry for far less time than I will. So
that's crazy.
yeah.
So what's it like living in well, I guess why did you decide to move to Oklahoma? Where you were in South Carolina before?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Oklahoma's home for me. It's where my family is.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Well, that's good. And how are, like do you get into like any trouble for this, this stain on
No,
your record or whatever, or
no, occasionally it, I mean, I guess I quote have the benefit of it not being a trial that happened close to home. It happened very far away. It's also very public. It's not that hard to find if you wanted to look up the case, the details, all that. But it's occasionally it comes up. I've had to talk about it with one employer before, and I laid it out for him very simply. It's like, hey, this is what happened. This is where I am now. She said I did. I said I didn't, and it didn't go well for me. And now it's just part of life. I'm just a guy trying to make it and out here pay my taxes like everybody else. And but yeah, I've had that conversation with one employer. It didn't go horribly. They were open.
oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, and I mean, anybody who spends 10, 15 minutes with me in conversation, I'm not that guy. And it becomes apparent real quick. There was a time I went to go update my registry at the Hughes County Sheriff's Office, and one of the deputies that was there, that is part of their compliance team for sex offenders, she was asking me all these questions about my case, and I was telling her, and she's like, "You just don't look the type." And I just kind of smiled. I said, "Because I'm not." And I finished filling out my paperwork, and thanks, have a good day.
Thanks for telling me I don't look the type, but it doesn't really
Right.
help.
Yeah, that doesn't really help. Gave me a little confidence boost for all of about 20 minutes, but that was it.
Well, so then how did you come in contact with like the Would You Care people and Arvis and stuff? Like, where did that come in?
This came in when, so my first interaction I was registered in a different county for a couple of years. And, apparently the state said many years ago that each county was going to have a compliance team, basically to go out and do this kind of quasi parole-like exercise of checking on people who were on the registry. I remember being at home in February, it was snowing, and all of a sudden, I was home with my kids and my wife at the time. And I think this was in 2022, and they were all home, and 3 sheriff's deputies in different vehicles come mobbing onto my property through our gate into our front yard. And I was concerning. They weren't flashing lights or sirens or anything like that. It was just very strange. And they come to the front door and they explain who they are, and they were sex offender compliance officers, and they came in and started asking me all kinds of questions. They didn't search my property or anything like that, and the lead officer was professional and friendly enough, and he just got some basic information and left. But it was embarrassing enough for me that I was like, I'm not dealing with this for the rest of my life. At that point, I'd kind of accepted it. You know what? Doing a quote change of address form basically every 90 days isn't that bad. But I'm not going to have somebody looking at me and checking on me, regardless of what I'm doing. I'm not trying to move covertly out here or anything crazy. Like, I keep my address up to date. I've been very compliant, but I'm not going to live like that, period. And I started really looking into what I could do for post-conviction relief, essentially trying to get my case re-examined, overturned, what have you, whatever I could do. And I found the group called Save Our Heroes. And I gave them a call, kind of explained the gist of my case. And they told me about the DAC iPad, which is a congressional appointed committee that oversees, it's kind of a government watchdog group created by the government. And their job is to basically look at sexual assaults in the military, statistics, lessons learned, the way to improve things on both sides of the aisle, for the accuser and the accused. And he said they have a public comment section. I highly suggest that you attend and speak at one. And the first one I attended telephonically, and I wrote a statement, and I spoke over the phone. And about 20 minutes after I made that statement, after the meeting had ended, I received a call from a Virginia number. And you know, I was like, that can't be a coincidence. I just spoke at an event in Virginia. Like, who is this person? So I answered it, and that's how I got in touch with Harvis. And you know, the group, you know, because we don't we're all, I wouldn't say we're all loosely affiliated. We all stay in pretty regular touch. I hear from Harvis about once a month about updates and things like that. And yeah, but that's kind of how we all got together. And I've talked to a few others since then that have been in similar shoes in a post-conviction aspect, and you know, they're looking for advice. And you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I know my issues very, very well inside and out. And I've given a few people advice on what they can do now that their traditional appeals are done and things like that. And that's kind of how I got in touch with all those guys. And since then, I've spoken at one other event, one other DAC iPad meeting, and I went to that one in person, and that was back in December of 2023. And that was recorded and videotaped, and it's hard to get through my statement in person without crying. But Arvis said it was very worth it because he was watching everybody else in the room. He said, "You had him," and he said that I need to come back and do another one. I plan on it. You know, it's an expensive trip, and I make okay money, but I want to go back and do it again for sure.
Well, you know, it's funny you should mention that, because I was going to ask you if you, first of all, I know that you've like been working with these people in your group, but do you guys meet in person, or is it just sort of like email and over the phone and that kind of thing?
It's a lot of email and over the phone, and you know, I talk to Arvis more than anyone else, and we've had a few video chats. Like I've occasionally, you know, I'll get a kind of I'll get the fire and the motivation really going, and I'll start looking for people that I think can help us. And I've found a few individuals and put him in contact with, and kind of opened the door to get their help and their voice. You know, because that's the biggest thing that we try to do is have a conversation with everybody that will listen. And that's why we're here now, trying to get our voice heard, because we think that that's essentially, you know, what they hoped would happen, is that this awful thing would happen with us and we'd kind of fade into obscurity. You know, but they don't, I think they seem to forget that they went after and destroyed the lives of hard men, and we don't take stuff lying down, at least not for very long. All it's going to take is the right event and the right circumstance, and we're gonna push back, and that's all this is, and it's pushing back through conversation and dialogue. So
yeah, for sure, that's what we try to do. So I wanted to ask, do you have any hope that your situation will change, or are you doing this mainly to help the next person that might find themselves or potentially find themselves in a similar situation?
Both. I think for sure, no matter what happens, is that I can help others. I've seen too much. I've been involved in too much, and I've experienced too much of the bad. But like I said earlier, I do think it's getting better in the services, and it's affecting their numbers. Their recruiting numbers are in the tank. They're bad. You know, it's
you're talking about Army, like military, you know, boys signing up. It's it's at like enrollment or whatever they call it. Recruitment is at it's very low. I assume there's a number of reasons for that, but that's definitely one of them.
It is one of them. And it's you know, it's like a sickness. It's not just contained in the realm of sexual assault. Any kind of woke DEI nonsense that is involved in one area of thought it spreads to the rest of it. You know, our quote first female admiral is a man in drag. That is the most anti-feminist thing I've ever seen in my life. So
you could say that, but I could definitely make the case that it's totally feminist. but it's like totally in line with that.
Traditional
Yeah.
feminists. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's equal
really,
parts, and I think
yeah.
that, you know, me and Arvis, we have a number of conversations. I know plenty of things that, not that I can't talk about, but that I won't yet, you know, just because there are things being done and movements being made and conversations being had with people capable of making real change. You know, the military did just release the guidelines behind standing up a conviction integrity unit, and some of the founding members of that movement they were there when I made my first statement, and they expressed interest in talking to me further. So my chances are never zero, but they're definitely zero if I don't advocate for myself, because who else is going to stand up and advocate for a convicted registered sex offender? Nobody's just going to do it. You know, you got to go out there and have those hard conversations. And
right. That's part of the point of putting you in that category, is that you're going to become kind of like, you know, toxic for anyone to like even want to touch. It's like radioactive, right?
Right.
So,
and I think it's irresponsible. And, you know, me and Arvis have had that conversation with navigating, getting other people on board to talk to us. Like it's a reality of our situation. We need to really understand it's not very palatable. It'll leave a bad taste in a lot of mouths. Like we need to really present it in a way, in a nice wrapping paper that says, hey, this isn't as bad as it sounds to talk about. Right. We're normal people. We're not.
Well, I heard from Arvis that you guys have been working with, you know, a couple of other people to help spread the message, but also there's groups like the Innocence Project.
Right.
How's that going? Have you?
I don't know too much about that front. I guess Arvis lives and breathes this stuff. I mean, it's very important to me too. But you know, Arvis is
he's very driven.
The man at the front. You know, he's got all the answers, and he's making the most. He's definitely the one making the most effort. And the rest of us contribute if and when we can. And it's, you know, it's like a game of football. We're just trying to move that pigskin a few yards every time we get a chance to touch it. So, and we all just kind of try to do our part. So,
yeah. I'm going to be meeting with Arvis next Tuesday, coming Tuesday rather, in person. I'm going to introduce him to another guy who's been doing a lot of work with men and men's issues. Paul Elam. He's like he's like one of the leaders, or one of the most active members. I don't like to say leaders because we all kind of do our own thing in our own way, right? So, so then what is, like, other than just continuing to spread the word of this, have you ever, you said that you are looking forward to like maybe doing like another speaking event or like a conference or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if we had one, so in case you don't know, we are part of the larger men's movement. We have these conferences. They're called the International Conference on Men's Issues, or the ICMI for short. And we do them every year. When COVID happened, we were doing them mostly online, but now we're back to doing them like in real, you know, like brick and mortar places. This one this year is going to be in Sydney, Australia. So that's probably a little bit too much. But we've been to Australia, the UK. There was one in India.
So long as I can get in the border, I'm there, man. I know there's some weird issues with sex offenders trying to travel sometimes. If that's, I would love a good excuse to go to Sydney, Australia. So don't write me out just yet.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if we're gonna go, but I'd love to. But the one after that in 2026 tentatively is gonna be here in the States. Right now we're looking at a couple of options, maybe even DC, considering, you know, DC is probably going to be a little bit more friendly to us setting up than it would have been a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah, so there's just, I think that, like, you're right. I think that things are better. I think more people are having these conversations. I think that we're mostly like done with this kind of woke, framework of everything, where you can't have honest conversations. You can't. I mean, these are literally really empathetic, really compassionate discussions. They're not fake. That it's not about like looking better. It's about actually talking about solutions that are real, and
Right.
talking about problems that are real. And this isn't, like I said many times before, this is in the military, this is on universities, this is in the workplace, this is everywhere. It's in our, and it's something that we have to really confront. And what I think the key is that the more people that speak on it, the more courage other people will find to
Right.
also speak on it. So
Right. Absolutely.
yeah. So do you have any like, because like now that we are going to be, I think that the numbers of enlisting men is going to grow. I think that we're seeing a positive change in the image of our military and our country. And I'm also extremely patriotic. Do you think that that being said, what advice would you give to young men going into the armed forces, just so that, they don't end up in a similar situation?
Right. I mean, if this was a year ago, I would have said not on your life. Um, and I make it very clear with some of the examples, and I don't skyline myself by telling my story if they don't already know it. I just tell them, it's not safe. It's not safe yet. Don't do it. But I think with Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense now, and everybody kind of, it's like everybody's eyes are opening, and only the most extreme of the liberal left are clinging on to the incredible woke ideals of the past. I think it's going to get way better, and I still think that young men need to, when you go in, you need to, enjoy the experience, but at the same time protect yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to have, it's dangerous, and it shouldn't be like that out here in the real world. It's not uncommon for you to go out and hang out with a friend or a girl you're talking to, and you have some drinks, and suddenly you guys are both feeling it and you have a romantic encounter. But in the military, that could still be very dangerous. I would basically say don't do that ever, even though that's not the circumstance that got me where I was. I've seen enough bad stories and bad outcomes to that situation that I would still advise don't do that. I would very much advise not dipping your pen in the company ink, so to speak. I think sleeping with your coworkers is messy. Being in the military doesn't make that any less true. I don't think the culture that has been cultivated over the last 10 to 15 years is going to be undone overnight. I think you need to be very careful and realize that even the best meaning of actions and intentions are gonna, they could have some serious consequences that you would have never expected. I don't think the coast is clear yet, but I think we're on our way to being a true war fighting nation. We have the greatest military on earth. I think it's taken a steep decline in the last several years, but I think we're on our way back, and people are starting to set all the BS aside and opening themselves up to the idea that we need to let our young men and women fight wars, real wars, not a war on whatever woke ideology they think is oppressing everyone else. That's not what the military is about. The military is about being ready to step up and defend our borders.
Yeah, it's about effectiveness. That's it.
Right.
It's not sentiment.
Right.
I want to issue a correction. I want to thank Holly Yeager in the chat for saying, because I was thinking of the wrong person when I was trying to think of a senator, and I said Klobuchar, I think. That's not who it is. It's Kristen Gillibrand.
Yeah,
that's right. That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Kirsten Gillibrand is who I was thinking of, and I apologize for that. But yeah, well, I just want to say thank you, Jerry. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we end the show here?
No, I think we did a pretty good recap. I mean, if people want to know a little more in depth about my story, I think our previous interview outlined that a little better. The
Yeah.
content of her allegations and things like that. We don't need to crack that open again. It's back there.
Well, yeah, I left it up there. I'll include a link to the original. Just,
Sure.
you know, it cuts off a little early because the battery on his phone died.
Yeah.
But you can just, you know, merge them. This is like part 2. Just look at it like a part 2. So,
Sequel.
yeah, a sequel, exactly. All right. Well, I guess that's it for me. I want to thank you guys. Let me just check to make sure I didn't miss any messages, because sometimes I do miss them, and I have to check our Discord server for those. By the way, you guys can join the Discord by becoming a member at feedthebadger.com/subscribe. Oh, okay. So nothing on there, but that's okay. Normally, because of the timing of this show, everyone's watching the Super Bowl right now, I assume, or getting ready to. So they'll
Yeah, it
probably
kicks
see
off at,
this tomorrow.
5:30, I think so.
Yeah, a little later. But I want to thank you again, Jerry, for coming on the show. And
Sure.
if you guys want to check out the links in the description so that you can find ways to support, you know, we basically just make it it's way too easy for people to make allegations, and then, you know, everyone just gets behind it, and that's just not that's unjust. It's just unjust, and it should not be the way that we conduct ourselves. So I want to thank you guys for joining us on the show, and checking this out and giving us a shot. So if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat, and we will talk to you guys in the next video.
Thanks, Brian.
Are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.